That night, in the conference room on the 40th floor of a skyscraper in downtown Boston, William Caldwell sat in silence amid a circle of 15 shareholders shouting at him. "You let a maid teach your son? Do you have any idea how that makes the entire corporation look?" The cold fluorescent light poured down on the face of the 42-year-old man, an investor once feared by Wall Street. Outside the glass wall, the city of Boston sparkled like a sky full of stars. But none of those stars mattered to him anymore. William looked at each angry face around the table. Then he smiled, a smile that 3 years ago, back when he was still the man he used to be, he could never have managed. "You want to know the truth?" His voice was low, slow, but steady as stone. "That woman taught my son something all my money could never buy. And if I had to choose between every one of you here, or the 7-year-old boy learning what it means to be a decent human being..." William rose to his feet, buttoned his suit jacket. "Then I choose my son, and I choose her." The room suddenly fell silent. No one said another word. Only the ticking clock remained, and the breathing of a man who had truly changed. But to understand how a man once so cold and unyielding as William Caldwell could utter those words, we have to turn back time, 3 years earlier, to an autumn afternoon in Beacon Hill, and to that fateful moment when a billionaire walked through his own front door, only to discover a truth that would keep him awake for many nights to come. This story is not only the journey of a man learning how to love again, but also the story of a woman who had lost everything, yet still chose to give. If you believe that kindness can change an entire life, hit subscribe and join me through the rest of this story, because you won't want to miss what happens next. And now, are you ready to find out what really happened on that autumn afternoon? An autumn afternoon in Boston. Crimson maple leaves drifted gently down Beacon Hill, covering the cobblestone sidewalks with a golden-orange carpet shimmering under the sunlight. William Caldwell steered his black Audi into the garage of his old stone mansion at exactly 3 o'clock in the afternoon, 4 hours earlier than usual. The meeting in Manhattan had just been cancelled. He was exhausted, his mind heavy and dull, longing only for a glass of whiskey and absolute silence. But as he stepped through the heavy oak door, what he heard wasn't silence. It was the voice of a woman, clear, warm, brimming with life. "Ethan, pay attention. Pi isn't just 3.14. It's an endless dance, the secret behind every circle in this world. From a bicycle wheel to the moon, even to the planet we live on." William froze in the hallway. His Italian leather shoes made no sound on the thick Persian rug. He turned his head toward the living room, and in that moment, he couldn't believe his eyes. In front of a large whiteboard, the very one he'd bought for Ethan last year but had never seen his son touch, his housekeeper, Lucia Rivera, was standing there holding a green marker. Across the board stretched numbers and mathematical symbols written in neat, graceful strokes. Almost beautiful. The formula for the area of a circle, diameter, radius. Concepts William only vaguely remembered from his days at MIT more than 20 years ago. And seated across from her, in a leather armchair twice his size, was Ethan, his 7-year-old son. The boy who, for the past 2 years since his mother's death, seemed to have lost all joy. The child psychologists said he was withdrawn. The child William himself hadn't known how to talk to, but now Ethan was smiling. He was asking questions. He was alive. "Miss Lucia, if I know the diameter of the moon, can I figure out..." How many basketballs it's as big as? Lucia laughed. A gentle, genuine laugh. Of course. You're very smart. Let's figure that out together. But before we do, can I ask you something? Why do you want to know that? Ethan paused, then softly answered, Because my mom used to say she'd always be on the moon watching me. I want to know. She's in a really big place, right? The air in the room seemed to freeze. Lucia knelt down, looking straight into the boy's eyes. Her voice was soft, but every word firm and full of feeling. Your mom is in a place bigger than any number I could ever teach you, Ethan. But you know what? Every time you learn something new, every time you laugh or get curious, she feels it. Because a mother's love, it has no formula. It's infinite. William felt something tighten in his chest. How long had it been since he last held his son? How long? Since he mentioned the boy's mother? How long had he been running from pain, burying himself in work, in spreadsheets and cold screens? Lucia stood up and continued teaching, still unaware that he was standing there. But William couldn't look away. Not because of the numbers on the board, but because of Ethan's eyes as he looked at Lucia. The eyes of a child who had just found hope. And in William's mind, a question echoed, sharp and aching. Who is this woman? And how could she do something that I, his own father, never could? William stepped back, then another step. His leather shoes finally touched the wooden floor, making a faint sound. Lucia turned in surprise. Her brown eyes widened. Mr. Caldwell, I didn't expect you home so soon. William said nothing. He only looked around the room he had lived in for 3 years, and suddenly realized that, for the first time, he was truly home. Do you think William will be angry? Or will he begin to recognize the gift fate quietly placed before him? Lucia Rivera gently set the marker down on the table. Her hands hurriedly wiped against the white apron. Her face flushed, not from embarrassment, but from fear. The fear of someone who had just crossed the boundary of her duty. I'm sorry, sir. I was cleaning the room when I saw Master Ethan sitting alone by the window. He asked me about math. I didn't think that. William raised his hand, signaling her to stop. His voice was deep, brief, but not cold. How long have you been teaching my son? The room fell suddenly silent. Ethan looked up. His clear blue eyes, just like his mother's, shimmered with worry. Dad, please don't be mad at Miss Lucia. I was the one who asked her to teach me. She's really smart, Dad. She even knows how to calculate the area of the moon. William looked at his son, surprised by the tone of the boy's voice. Ethan rarely spoke much, and even more rarely defended anyone, especially in front of him. He turned back to Lucia, his voice lower now, softer. I'll ask again. How long have you been teaching him? Lucia swallowed hard, then answered quietly, About 3 months, sir. 3 months. 3 months had passed right inside his own home, and he hadn't known. 3 months long enough for his son to change, while he had been too blind to notice. William remembered. Just last week, passing by Ethan's room, he had seen the boy drawing circles and writing strange numbers. He'd assumed it was just childish scribbling. It wasn't. He took a breath, then asked, What did you study? The question was short, but his tone wasn't harsh. It was the voice of a man trying to understand. Lucia hesitated, then spoke in a trembling voice. Engineering, sir. Civil engineering. I studied at the University of Puerto Rico, San Juan, but I didn't graduate. William froze. An engineer. The woman he had known only by name for 3 years The woman he had considered merely the maid had once been an engineering student, and he had never asked, never cared. A sting rose in his chest. He, the man who knew the names of 47 CEOs in his investment portfolio, who remembered every assistant in Manhattan and even the waiter at the golf club, knew nothing about the woman who lived under his own roof. The one who cooked for him every day, who cared for his son, and now was rekindling in that child something he himself had long lost. "Why didn't you finish your studies?" Lucia lowered her head, her fingers clutching the edge of her apron. "Because my family needed money, sir. My father died when I was in my 3rd year. He left behind a large debt. My mother had a heart condition. My sister was still young. I was the eldest. So Her voice faltered. "I had to work. I came here." William stared at her, truly looked at her, perhaps for the first time. She was about 1 meter 62, small but strong. Warm brown skin, black hair neatly tied behind her neck. Deep brown eyes, the eyes of someone who had once carried bright dreams, now worn down by time and fate. And yet, every time she looked at Ethan, those eyes lit up, as if the boy was the last flame she still carried. William asked softly, "Do you regret it?" Lucia lifted her head, momentarily stunned. "Sir?" "Leaving school. Giving up your dream. Do you regret it?" Lucia fell silent. Then she smiled, a sad, gentle smile, but not a bitter one. "I don't regret choosing my family, sir. But sometimes, every night I dream of standing before a building I designed myself, and at its entrance there's a plaque engraved with the words, 'For the children who have no school.'" She paused, her voice lowering. "I once wanted to build schools, sir. For children like my sister. Like Ethan, before." "Before?" William frowned. Lucia nodded, glancing at Ethan with a tender look. "Before I started teaching, he used to sit by the window for hours, not playing, not smiling, like a child waiting for something that would never return." William felt his heart tighten. He knew what Ethan had been waiting for his mother. And deeper still, waiting for him, the father too busy to see his own son drifting away. Lucia lowered her head, her voice fading. "If you don't want me to teach him anymore, I'll stop, sir." "I'm sorry for overstepping." "No." William's voice rang out, firm, decisive, making both of them freeze. "You will continue teaching my son." Lucia looked up, her eyes wide with surprise. Ethan turned to his father, too, his gaze a mix of joy and caution, as if afraid that if he blinked, this moment might disappear. William swallowed, then spoke slowly, every word deliberate. "But from now on, I'll join you. Sometimes, to truly see the worth of another person, one must let them reflect the goodness that has long slept within oneself. Can a man who once lived by reason alone find the courage to step into the world of his own child, and of the woman who taught that child how to smile again?" In the days that followed, William Caldwell began a habit he had never practiced once in his 20-year career, coming home at exactly 5 o'clock. No notice, no explanation. He simply showed up. On the first day, William sat in the corner of the living room, on the dark leather chair his wife Emma had loved to sit in every night to read. He opened his laptop, pretending to answer emails, but his ears were tuned to every word Lucia said to Ethan. "Today, we're learning about gravity, Ethan. Do you know why, when you drop an apple, it falls to the ground instead of flying up into the sky? Because it's heavy?" Lucia chuckled softly. "Almost right. But actually, it's because Earth is pulling the apple toward itself. Just like your mother's love for you." No matter where you are, that love will always pull you back home." William lifted his head. Ethan nodded thoughtfully, his eyes bright, as if he had just understood something far greater than a physics formula. Lucia wasn't just teaching math, she was teaching hope. On the third day, William closed his laptop. He no longer pretended to work. He simply sat there, silent, listening. Lucia was teaching about the perimeter of a square, but in a way no teacher he'd ever known could have done. "Ethan, imagine this room is a square, okay? If you want to tape LED lights all around the walls, you need to know the perimeter. But you know what? In life, we also have to measure. Measure our time, measure our love, measure what we want to surround our lives with." The boy tilted his head. "What about you, Miss Lucia? What do you want to surround your life with?" The question made Lucia freeze. William saw her turn away slightly, quickly wiping a tear from the corner of her eye. "I want to surround my life with children who are laughing, with schools filled with light, and with the hope that one day you'll be the one who changes the world." Ethan smiled, the purest smile William had seen since the day Emma died. "Then I'll be an engineer like you. I'll build schools for you, Miss Lucia." Lucia laughed and pulled the boy into her arms, and from the corner of the room, William felt his throat tighten. How long had it been since he last held his son that way? On the fifth day, something strange happened. Lucia was teaching fractions. Ethan frowned, his forehead wrinkling. He didn't understand. And William, the man who graduated from MIT, the man who signed million-dollar contracts every day, suddenly spoke up. "Imagine a pizza." Lucia and Ethan both turned, startled. William stood, walking toward the whiteboard. For the first time in 3 years, he stepped into his son's space. "If the pizza has 8 slices, and I eat 2, how many parts have I eaten?" Ethan thought for a moment, then exclaimed, 2 over 8. "Oh, 1/4, right, Dad?" William nodded. Lucia smiled faintly, her eyes holding something curious, surprise, and the look of someone witnessing a small miracle. "That's right, son. And if you eat 2 slices too, how many have we eaten together?" Ethan giggled. 4 over 8. That's 1/2. Exactly. William knelt down, his eyes level with his son's. For the first time in 2 years, he placed his hand on Ethan's shoulder. "You're very smart, Ethan. And I'm sorry. It took me far too long to realize it." Ethan said nothing. He simply leaned forward and hugged his father tightly. And William, the man who hadn't shed a single tear at his wife's funeral, broke down crying. Lucia stood quietly nearby. She placed a hand on her chest, her eyes glistening. She didn't know that William was looking at her over Ethan's shoulder. And in that moment, he understood. This woman wasn't just teaching his son mathematics, she was teaching him how to be a father. From that day on, everything changed. William no longer sat in the corner. He sat beside Ethan. He asked questions, laughed when his son laughed, encouraged him when he made mistakes. Lucia was no longer the maid. She was a teacher, a friend, a bridge connecting 2 souls, a father who had once lost his son, and a child who had once lost faith in the world. But William didn't yet know. This story was only beginning, and the real challenge would not come from numbers, but from the cold prejudices of the world outside. It was a Saturday afternoon in early October. The sky over Boston was tinted in shades of gold and gray, lazy sunlight filtering through the tall glass windows of the Caldwell private office. William stood before the large bookshelf, searching for an old architecture book to show Ethan. The boy had just asked, "Dad, How do you build a house that doesn't collapse? William smiled. That innocent question reminded him of himself at 7. Once looking at the world with the same wonder. He pulled a thick book from the shelf. And then, something small and heavy fell to the floor. A dark brown leather notebook. Old, the corners frayed, its pages curled, the string tie nearly torn. William bent down and picked it up. There was no name on the cover. He opened it. And in that instant, his heart skipped. The pages were filled with handwriting in Spanish. Soft, careful strokes, each line carrying a quiet sorrow. William wasn't fluent in Spanish, but he recognized a few words. Sueños, dreams, mamá, mother, sacrificio, sacrifice. Between the written lines were math problems, sketches of bridges, drawings of foundations, and notes on structural formulas, the records of a passionate engineer. And on the very last page, one line stood out in English, as if written as a message to herself. If I cannot build a school for myself, I will become the school for others. My dream is not dead. It has simply changed its form. Beneath it, a date, June 15th, 2019. The day Lucia came to America. William sank into his chair. The notebook trembled in his hands. She had left it behind. Perhaps during cleaning. Perhaps long ago. And maybe she hadn't looked for it. Not because she didn't know where it was, but because it hurt too much to see it again. That night, after Ethan had fallen fast asleep, William stopped before a door on the 3rd floor. A small room he hadn't entered once in 3 years. He knocked softly. Miss Lucia, may I speak with you for a moment? The door opened. Lucia appeared, wearing a simple gray sweater, her hair loose around her shoulders. Her face reflected surprise mixed with unease. What is it, Mr. Caldwell? William held out the notebook. Lucia saw it, and her face went pale. You found it. I'm sorry, William said quietly. I didn't mean to invade your privacy. It fell when I pulled out a book. Lucia's hands trembled as she took it back, pressing it tightly against her chest, as if holding a lost piece of her soul. I thought I had lost it long ago. William said nothing. Then he saw a tear slide down her cheek. Would you tell me about it? His voice was gentle, no longer carrying the tone of an employer. Just the voice of a man who wanted to understand. Lucia invited him in. The small room was strikingly neat. A single bed, a worn wooden desk. On it sat a framed photograph. 3 women standing by the coast of Puerto Rico, smiling brightly in the sun. That's my mother, my sister Sophia, and me. Lucia's voice trembled. The photo was taken before my father passed away. William looked at the picture for a long time. Lucia in the photo looked younger, radiant, her eyes full of hope. And he realized, in this 500-square-meter mansion, it was as if she had never truly existed. Lucia sat on the edge of the bed, opened the notebook, and flipped through the pages as though reliving the shattered years of her life. In my 3rd year of university, I was chosen for a bridge design project in a poor mountain region of Puerto Rico. It was my greatest dream. But then, my father died. Suddenly. A car accident. Her voice broke. He left a debt of $67,000 from my grandmother's medical treatments years before. My mother had heart disease. Sophia was only 14. I was the eldest. I had to choose. William sat quietly on the wooden chair opposite her, listening to every word. I dropped out. Applied to come to the U.S. as a domestic worker. Here, the pay was 4 times higher than in Puerto Rico. I told my mother, I'll come back. I'll build the most beautiful schools for the children of Ponce. But Lucia lowered her head. Tears fell onto the old notebook. 3 years have passed. I'm still in debt. My mother is still sick. Sophia needs tuition money. And my dream now only lives within these pages. William felt his chest tighten, as if something were squeezing it. He thought about himself, about all the times he'd complained over losing $500,000 in a deal, or when a flight was delayed for hours. Then he looked at this woman, the one who had given up everything, carried her family on her shoulders, and still smiled every morning to teach his son about dreams. Lucia. William said her name, for the first time, in the voice of a human being, not a master. She looked up. Her eyes were red and wet. You are the strongest person I've ever met. Lucia shook her head softly, smiling faintly through tears. No, sir. I'm just someone who didn't have another choice. William met her eyes, his voice firm. No. People without choices become bitter. But you still choose to give. You choose to teach my son with love, even when you have nothing left to hold on to. That's not weakness, Lucia. That's strength. Lucia didn't reply. She just sat there, clutching the notebook to her chest, and cried. And William, the man who once stood at the top of the financial world, for the first time in his life, felt small before another human being. In the weeks that followed, something strange began happening inside the Beacon Hill mansion. William Caldwell, a man who once considered dinner merely the pause between two meetings, now began having dinner with Lucia and Ethan. Not in the grand dining hall with its cold 12-seat table, but in the small kitchen, where the light was warmer and laughter sounded more natural. Lucia cooked Puerto Rican dishes, mofongo, arroz con gandules, tostones. Ethan delighted in memorizing their names in Spanish, while William, who once ate only meals designed by his private chef, suddenly discovered that the flavor of happiness could be that simple. But the outside world wouldn't let them be. On Monday morning, as William was reviewing investment reports, his assistant, Catherine Chen, walked into the office, her face tense. William, we have a problem. She set a newspaper down on his desk. The headline screamed across the front page, Billionaire Caldwell lets his maid teach his son. Irresponsible parenting or signs of collapse. The article came from one of Boston's most notorious financial tabloids, dripping with poisonous insinuation. It claimed William was losing direction after his wife's death. It questioned the judgment of a man managing a $3 billion fund who couldn't manage his own family. And worst of all, it called Lucia an unqualified, unknown woman influencing the heir to the Caldwell empire. William finished reading and placed the paper down. His face betrayed no emotion, only one quiet question. Who leaked it? Catherine hesitated. We suspect Marcus Whitmore. Marcus, a board member and William's former close friend, until their falling out 6 months earlier over a merger deal. He's rallying shareholders, William, Catherine said softly. They want an emergency meeting. They think you're not stable enough to lead the company. William walked to the window, gazing out at Boston draped in the morning mist. His voice was low but steady. Schedule the meeting. News spread like wildfire. Within 48 hours, major outlets had picked it up. On social media, the debate exploded. A few defended William, saying it was his private life. But the majority, especially Boston's elite, mocked him. A billionaire who can't even hire a tutor? A maid teaching math? What's next? The gardener giving violin lessons? The gossip storm ricocheted back to the mansion, and the first to suffer was Ethan. One afternoon, he came home with red, swollen eyes. William was in his study when he heard quiet sobbing from upstairs. He rushed up. Lucia was sitting on the floor, holding Ethan, gently stroking his hair. "What happened?" William's voice was tight. Ethan looked up, his face wet with tears. "My friends at school. They said Miss Lucia isn't smart enough to teach me. They said you're stupid for believing in her. Dad, why should I be ashamed of Miss Lucia? She's kind, Dad." William knelt down and pulled his son into his arms. "You never have to be ashamed of good people, Ethan. Never." But when he looked up, he saw Lucia. Her eyes reflected both pain and guilt, as if she herself were to blame for making the child cry. That night, after Ethan had fallen asleep, Lucia came to William's study. The room glowed softly with light from the fireplace. William sat with a glass of whiskey in hand, the flames flickering in his tired eyes. "Mr. Caldwell." Lucia's voice trembled. "Perhaps I should stop." William turned. "What did you say?" "I'm causing trouble for you." "For Ethan. I'm just a maid. I shouldn't cross my boundaries." Her voice cracked, though she tried to stay composed. William set down his glass and stepped closer. "Boundaries?" he said slowly. "Lucia, do you know what you've done? You saved my son. You saved me. And now you're telling me you want to stop? Because of a few people who don't understand what true worth means? But sir, your reputation, your company." "My company?" William gave a small, bitter laugh. "Lucia, 3 years ago, when Emma died, I thought keeping the company together was the only way to protect my son. But you know what? I lost him. He lived under the same roof, yet we were strangers." He paused, his gaze softening. "Then you came along. You taught my son more than numbers. You taught him about hope, about kindness, about how pain doesn't mean surrender." William's voice broke slightly. "You taught me all of that, Lucia. I don't care what they say. I don't care how many shareholders disagree. If I have to choose between all of that and a child learning how to smile again, I choose my son." Lucia couldn't hold back anymore. She burst into tears, her hands wet with them. "But my mother, my sister, if I lose this job—" William shook his head firmly. "You won't lose your job." Lucia looked up, stunned. "But you also won't just be a maid anymore." "What do you mean?" "Starting tomorrow, you're Ethan's official tutor, with a salary to match. And I will stand before the board, before all of Boston, and tell them, this is the best woman my family has ever known." Lucia shook her head, wiping her tears. "You don't have to do that." William looked at her, his voice warm but resolute. "It's not that I have to, Lucia. It's that I want to." And William kept his word. A week later, he walked into the boardroom on the 40th floor. 15 furious eyes followed him. The air was thick, like a storm waiting to break. And that was where the story, the one that turned everything upside down, truly began. Sometimes, to defend what's right, you have to stand alone. But sometimes, one person standing up is enough to change how the world sees the true worth of a human being. The boardroom on the 40th floor was bathed in cold fluorescent light. Beyond the glass walls, the city of Boston stretched out like a vast chessboard of power. But inside this room, power was being challenged. Marcus Whitmore, silver hair neatly combed, tailored Armani suit, eyes sharp as blades, sat at the head of the table opposite William. On either side of him were 14 members of the board and major shareholders, people who had once called William a financial genius. "William," Marcus began, his voice low, cold, and precise, like an indictment. We're not here today to attack you personally. But we have a responsibility to this fund, to the $3 billion in assets, and to the hundreds of families who trust us." He paused, looking around, letting each word drop heavily into the thick air. "And when the head of this fund begins behaving questionably in his personal life, we have the right to ask, are you still in the right state of mind to make sound decisions for this company?" Tension spread across the room like a current of ice. An older woman spoke up, Eleanor Hastings, 68, a shareholder from the founding generation. "William, I know you're grieving after losing Emma. We all care for you, but allowing a woman without a teaching degree, without a full background check, to educate your son, that truly shows poor judgment." Marcus seized the moment, his voice cutting sharper. "And it's hurting our credibility. The press is mocking us. Partners are beginning to question us. Last week, Morgan Stanley reached out. They're reconsidering whether to continue working with us." William sat still, hands clasped in front of him. He didn't react. He simply listened, as if letting them drain every drop of judgment they had to give. Then Thomas Brennan, the fund's lawyer, spoke up. "William, we have a simple solution. Dismiss the woman. Hire a certified tutor. And this will all blow over." The air went silent. Every gaze turned toward William. He slowly rose to his feet. The faint scrape of his chair echoed through the still room. William walked to the window, looking out over the city blanketed in the pale morning fog. Then he turned back. His eyes swept over every face in the room. "Do you have children?" The simple question caught everyone off guard. Marcus frowned. "William, what does that have to do?" "Answer me," William cut in. "Do you have children?" Eleanor nodded. Thomas did too. Almost everyone did. William nodded slightly. "Then you know what it's like, to watch your child suffer and be unable to do anything, to live under the same roof, and yet be unable to reach their heart." His voice was low, but every word carried the weight of loss. 3 years ago, Emma died, and I thought that to protect Ethan, I had to secure his financial future. I worked 16 hours a day. I signed million-dollar deals. I built a flawless investment portfolio. He paused, taking a deep breath. But while I was doing all that, my son sat by the window for hours, staring outside. He didn't talk. He didn't laugh. Doctors said he showed signs of depression. 7 years old. A 7-year-old child. Depressed, Eleanor lifted a trembling hand to her mouth, eyes glistening. William continued, his voice lower now but burning with quiet fire. "And then, one day, I came home early. And I saw her. The woman I'd called only Miss for 3 years. Standing in front of a whiteboard, teaching my son mathematics. But it wasn't just mathematics." He stepped closer to the table, placing both hands on it, looking directly at them. "She taught my son that the world is still worth being curious about. That pain doesn't mean the end, that his mother is still there, in every lesson, in every smile." His voice caught. "She taught my son things that I, a billionaire father, never could." Marcus opened his mouth to interrupt, but William raised a hand, stopping him. "You say Lucia Rivera has no qualifications?" His voice rang clear, every word striking the table like steel. "She studied engineering at the University of Puerto Rico, ranking in the top 5% of her class. She dropped out not because she was unfit, but because her father died, leaving behind a $67,000 debt. She was the eldest, and she had to choose." He looked straight into Marcus's eyes, his gaze burning. "She chose her family. She chose sacrifice. And you? You dare call that unqualified?" The room fell into absolute silence. Not a single breath sounded. William went on, his tone now firm, unwavering. "Lucia Rivera has more degrees than any expensive tutor I could ever hire. She has a degree in kindness, in resilience, in the ability to see a broken child and piece him back together." He straightened, his voice rising like a declaration. "And if you think I'll fire that woman to protect the company's image, you're wrong. Because for the first time in my life, I've realized something, that true legacy isn't measured in bank accounts. It's in the people we leave behind when we're gone. And if Ethan grows up to be a kind, intelligent, compassionate man, that will be my greatest success." The room was silent. Then Eleanor stood. She walked over to William, her eyes glistening. "William, I'm sorry," she said softly. "I have 2 children. And I made the same mistake you did. I thought money was everything. But now they're grown. They don't call me anymore. They don't need me." She took his hand. "You're doing the right thing. Don't follow in my footsteps." Thomas Brennan, the coldest man in the room, nodded slowly. But Marcus tried to keep his voice composed. "This is a boardroom, William, not an emotional talk show. We must decide with reason, not sentiment." "Marcus," William cut him off, his tone cold but calm. "If you want to call a vote of no confidence, go ahead. But I won't change silence." No vote was taken. Because most of the people in that room, people who once believed a person's worth was measured in money, now stood with William. When he stepped out of the boardroom, Catherine Chen was waiting in the hallway. Her eyes were full of emotion. "You did it," she said with a smile. William nodded slightly. But in his eyes there was something deeper than victory. Because he knew the real battle was far from over. Sometimes, to hold on to what's right, you have to risk everything. But there are battles, when you stand for kindness, that change the world forever. 2 days after the board meeting, another storm hit. This time, it didn't come from the board of directors. It came from Lucia Rivera's own heart. It was a Thursday night at the end of October. Autumn wind howled through the trees of Boston, and yellow leaves slapped against the mansion's windows like knocks from the past. William was sitting in the study when he heard Lucia's phone ring in the kitchen. Her voice answered, and then suddenly fell silent. He stood and stepped out. Lucia was standing frozen in the kitchen. Her phone had slipped from her hand and clattered onto the tiled floor. Her face had gone pale. "Lucia?" She didn't answer. Her body trembled, arms wrapped tightly around herself, as if she might shatter. William hurried to her side, placing a hand on her shoulder. "What happened?" Lucia slowly lifted her tear-filled eyes. "My mother. She had a heart attack. The doctors say she needs immediate surgery. But—" her voice broke apart. "The cost is $45,000. Insurance won't cover it. My sister has no money. If she doesn't have surgery within 72 hours, she'll—" Her voice failed. She sank to the floor, clutching her knees, sobbing uncontrollably. William knelt beside her. "Lucia, listen to me. I'll take care of it." "No!" Lucia shook her head violently. "You've done too much already. You defended me in front of the board. You gave me a job. I can't keep taking from you. I have to go. I have to go back to Puerto Rico." William gripped her shoulders, looking straight into her eyes. "Lucia, this isn't charity. This is family. You're part of this family now." Lucia broke down, crying harder. "But I'm not your family. I'm just—" "You're the woman who saved my son," William said firmly. "You saved me too. Now it's my turn. Please, let me help." Within 6 hours, William had arranged everything. A private jet was prepared to fly to San Juan, Puerto Rico. A top team of cardiologists from Boston was assigned to the case. The $45,000 operation cost was transferred immediately. But Lucia still hesitated. "I have to go," she said, standing beside the small packed suitcase. "But if I go, who will teach Ethan?" William placed a hand on her shoulder. "I will." "You've already taught me how." Lucia looked at him, her eyes red and swollen. "What if I can't come back?" The question stopped William cold. What was she afraid of? Being held back home? That he'd find someone else to replace her? Or that everything in Beacon Hill, Ethan, Boston, this newfound warmth, had been just a dream she was now forced to wake from? "Lucia." William took both her hands and looked deep into her eyes. "You will come back. Because we need you. Ethan needs you. And I—" He stopped. For the first time he realized what he had never dared to admit. "I need you too." Lucia's flight left at 11 that night. William stood on the tarmac of the private airfield, watching the jet lift off and vanish into the black sky. When he returned to the mansion, the house felt colder than ever. Ethan was asleep. On the boy's pillow, William found a small piece of paper, the uneven handwriting of a child. "Miss Lucia, I prayed for your grandma. I'll study hard, and I'll wait for you to come back. I love you." William held the note and sank into a chair. And for the first time in years, he prayed. Not for a deal. Not for the company. Not for his reputation. But for a woman flying home. A woman who had changed his life. 3 days passed. Every night, Lucia called. Her voice was tired but laced with hope. The surgery was a success. Her mother was recovering. But there was something in her tone that sounded farther away each time. On the 4th night, Lucia called again. William could hear the wind and waves in the background. "Where are you?" "The beach at Ponce," she said softly. "Where I grew up." "I'm watching the sunset. Is it beautiful?" "Very. But—" She fell silent. "But what?" "I just keep thinking about Ethan. Wondering if he's doing his homework, if he misses me." William smiled, though she couldn't see it. "Ethan writes to you every day. He leaves the letters on my desk, makes me read them before we send them." Lucia laughed, a warm, quiet laugh. "That boy is the greatest gift I've ever received." "Lucia," William hesitated, then spoke honestly. "When are you coming back?" Lucia was silent for a long while. "Do you want me to come back?" "Yes, very much. For Ethan?" William looked out the window. Boston's lights shimmered against the night sky. "Not just for Ethan." That night, William didn't sleep. He sat in Ethan's room, watching his son sleep. Then he climbed to the 3rd floor, into Lucia's small room. Everything was still there. The brown leather notebook on the desk, the photo of 3 women on the beach. And he realized the 500-square-meter mansion filled with expensive furniture had never been a home until Lucia came. The next morning, William's phone lit up with a message from Lucia. "My sister wants me to stay. My mother needs me. But my heart is in Boston." William stared at the words, and he knew exactly what he had to do. William Caldwell had never been a man of impulse. Every decision in his life had been calculated, measured against dozens of variables. That was how he built a financial empire worth $3 billion. But that morning, he did something even he hadn't expected of himself. He booked 2 plane tickets to Puerto Rico. "Dad, are we going to find Miss Lucia?" Ethan sat in the private jet's leather seat, eyes glowing with excitement. He wore a navy sweater and clutched a small backpack filled with the letters he had written to Lucia. William fastened his son's seatbelt and smiled. "That's right. We're going to tell her that our home needs her. Dad, do you love Miss Lucia?" The innocent question made William freeze. He looked at his son, then slowly nodded. "I respect her, and I'm grateful to her, because she gave me something I thought I'd lost forever." "What's that?" "You." William gently brushed Ethan's hair. "Lucia helped me find you again." The jet landed in San Juan at 2 in the afternoon. The tropical air rushed in, hot, humid, and filled with salt and sunlight, so different from Boston's autumn chill. William rented a car and drove south toward Ponce, over 2 hours away. Ethan sat in the back seat, his face pressed to the window, amazed by the brightly painted houses, the tall coconut trees, the children playing soccer on dusty streets. "Dad, this place is so pretty. Is this where Miss Lucia grew up?" "Yes, it is." William glanced at his son's smiling reflection in the rearview mirror and thought, this was the first time in 3 years that father and son were taking a trip together as a family. They arrived in Ponce at sunset. Using the address from her employment records, William drove into a small seaside neighborhood. The houses were modest, their walls faded by time, but the air was alive. Laughter of children, the smell of rice and beans, the sound of a guitar drifting from a window. At the end of the street stood a small light blue house, shaded by an old mango tree, and on the wooden rocking chair on the porch, Lucia sat there. She was holding a young girl with long black hair, maybe 17, her sister, Sophia. The two were laughing softly in Spanish, their voices blending with the rhythm of the ocean breeze. William stopped the car. Lucia looked up. When she saw the unfamiliar black sedan, then saw William step out, and Ethan running toward her, her face froze for a moment. "Miss Lucia!" Ethan shouted, his backpack bouncing as he sprinted across the street. Lucia leapt to her feet, hands covering her mouth, tears flooding her eyes. "Ethan! You came here?" The boy threw his arms around her. "I missed you." "I waited for you to come back, but you didn't. So Dad said, 'We're coming to find you.'" Lucia held him tightly, sobbing too hard to speak. Sophia stood beside them, eyes glistening as she wiped her tears. William walked forward, slowly, quietly. He stopped a few steps away, watching, the boy holding the woman as if she were his mother. Lucia looked up through her tears. "Mr. Caldwell, why did you—" "I came to tell you something," William said, his voice low but warm. He stepped closer, eyes meeting hers. "Lucia Rivera, you've worked in my house for 3 years, but I never truly saw you. I didn't know your dreams, your pain, or your strength. But now I do." Lucia shook her head, her voice trembling. "You don't have to." "But I want to," William interrupted gently. "I didn't come to apologize. I came to say thank you." He took a deep breath. "Thank you for saving my son. Thank you for teaching me how to be a father. And thank you for showing me that true worth isn't in a bank account. It's in the human heart." Lucia trembled, tears streaming down her face. William turned to Sophia, the young girl with the same eyes as her sister. "You must be Sophia?" She nodded shyly. "My sister told me so much about you and Ethan." William smiled. "What does your family need? What does your mother need?" "Tell me," Lucia shook her head quickly. "No, you've done too much already. My mother is past the worst. Lucia." William gently placed a hand on her shoulder. "I'm not asking to give charity. I'm asking because you are family. Just 2 words, your family." And Lucia broke down crying. Sophia did too. She threw her arms around her sister, sobbing like a child. That night, William and Ethan were invited inside. The house was small, perhaps no larger than the living room of the Beacon Hill mansion, but it radiated warmth. Family photos lined the walls. The smell of Puerto Rican cooking filled the air. Laughter echoed from room to room. In the living area, Mrs. Rosa Rivera, 62, lay resting after her surgery. Her face was etched with wrinkles, but her eyes were gentle and kind. When Sophia told her who their guests were, she insisted on meeting them. William entered and knelt by her bedside. "Mrs. Rosa, my name is William Caldwell." The elderly woman clasped his hands, tears rolling down her cheeks. "Gracias, gracias, Señor. You saved my life. You gave my daughter a better one." William shook his head, his voice breaking. "No, ma'am. You're mistaken. It's your daughter who saved my family." Mrs. Rosa smiled faintly, turning toward Lucia. "Lucia, my dear, every night I pray you'll find the place you belong. And now, I think I've seen it." Lucia wept, kneeling beside her mother. "But I can't leave you, or Sophia." "You're not leaving us," her mother said softly but firmly. "You're giving us something precious, hope. Go back to Boston, my daughter. Live the life you deserve that night." Beneath a star-filled Puerto Rican sky, William Caldwell and Lucia Rivera stood by the ocean. Waves lapped gently at the shore. The salty wind tangled through her hair. "Will you come back?" William asked. Lucia looked out at the vast sea, then turned and smiled. "Are you sure?" "More sure than anything." Lucia nodded slightly, and that smile, for the first time in many days, carried no sadness. "Then, let's go home." The flight back to Boston was silent, but not the tense kind of silence. It was the quiet, shared by people looking forward, carrying in their hearts a new resolve. Lucia sat by the window, gazing down at the endless ocean below. Ethan had fallen asleep on her shoulder. Across from them, William watched the scene with an unfamiliar feeling: peace. When the plane touched down in Boston, the sky was dark. But within William, an idea had begun to grow. An idea that could change everything. The next morning, William called for a special meeting. Not with the board of directors, but with Catherine Chen, his attorney Thomas Brennan, and Eleanor Hastings, the 68-year-old woman who had stood by him in his confrontation with Marcus. "I want to create a foundation," William began firmly. "Not an investment fund, an education fund." Catherine leaned back, surprised. "An education fund? William, are you talking about charity?" "Not just charity." William stood, walking to the whiteboard. "I want to build schools where none exist, train teachers for remote communities, and give back hope to children like Ethan, children who are losing faith in themselves." Eleanor smiled, proud. "That woman really has changed you, William." "She has," he nodded without hesitation. "And I want her to lead this foundation." Thomas frowned. "I respect Miss Rivera, but she's never managed a nonprofit. She doesn't have experience." "She has something more important," William interrupted. "Vision. The memory of someone who once had opportunity taken away. And she'll fight for those children harder than anyone." He looked straight at Thomas. "I'm investing $50 million into the foundation, and I want Lucia Rivera to be the CEO and chief architect." The room fell silent. Then Eleanor spoke first. "I'll contribute $5 million." When William told Lucia, she could hardly believe it. They sat in the office as the golden light of sunset streamed through the windows. "CEO?" Lucia stammered. I I don't know how to run an organization. I only know math, design. Exactly, William smiled. You know design. You'll design the schools that once existed only in your dreams. As for management, we'll hire a team. But the vision and the heart of this foundation must come from you. Lucia shook her head, tears spilling down her cheeks. I'm not worthy? Lucia. William rose, standing before her. You spent 3 years taking care of my family, not for money or recognition, but because you are kind. Now it's my turn, he extended his hand. Let me help you build that dream, not out of gratitude, but because I believe in you. Lucia looked at his hand, then into his eyes. For the first time in her life, she no longer saw herself as the maid. She took his hand. Then, let's build it together. 6 months later, the Rivera Caldwell Education Foundation was officially launched. The gala took place at a Grand Boston hotel. More than 200 guests, philanthropists, business leaders, and teachers from underprivileged regions filled the hall. On stage stood Lucia Rivera, behind the microphone, in a tailored gray suit. No white apron, no hesitation. She was now the CEO of a $55 million foundation. When I was 20, Lucia began, her voice trembling but strong, I stood on a hill in Puerto Rico, looking down at the small homes below, and I promised myself, one day I'll build a school here. Then life happened. My father died, our family went bankrupt, and that dream broke with it. She paused, scanning the audience until she found William and Ethan sitting in the front row. But 3 years ago, I met a family, a father who had lost his way, and a little boy who was losing hope. When I taught that boy math, I didn't know that they would teach me something far greater. Hope doesn't die. It just changes form. Applause swelled through the room. Lucia smiled through her tears. Today, we announce our first project, the Rosa Rivera Elementary School in Ponce, Puerto Rico, a free school for 300 children. And it will be designed by me, the woman who once thought her dream had died. The hall rose to its feet. Many wept openly. William watched Lucia, radiant, confident, and realized that this pride was something money could never buy. Lucia wasn't just the foundation's CEO. William offered her a second role, personal strategic advisor. I want you to work with me, he told her in a private meeting. Not because I need an assistant, but because I need a reminder of what truly matters. Lucia looked confused. What do you want me to do? Join me in investment meetings. Tell me where we should invest, based on impact, not just profit. I spent 20 years building wealth. Now I want to spend the next 20 building a legacy, and I need you beside me. Lucia couldn't speak. She simply nodded, tears glistening in her eyes. 1 year later, the Rosa Rivera Elementary School was complete. William, Lucia, and Ethan flew to Ponce for the opening ceremony. Mrs. Rosa and Sophia's family were there too. The school sat on a hillside overlooking the sea. Walls painted pastel blue. Classrooms flooded with natural light. A wide playground below. At the gate hung a gleaming plaque, Rosa Rivera Elementary School, where dreams begin again. Design, Lucia Rivera. Architect sponsored by Rivera Caldwell Education Foundation. Lucia stood before it, trembling. Mrs. Rosa embraced her daughter, tears streaming. You did it, Lucia. I'm so proud of you. William held Ethan's hand. The boy, now 9 years old, taller, more confident. Dad, look, Ethan said, pointing at the laughing children running into the school. They're just like me 3 years ago. But now, they have a chance. William knelt beside him. You know, this isn't just Miss Lucia's work. It's yours, too. Mine? Ethan blinked. If it weren't for you, I'd never have met her. If you hadn't been curious about math, she wouldn't have taught you. And if there hadn't been love between you and her, this school wouldn't exist. Ethan smiled, then ran to hug Lucia. Miss Lucia, can I teach the kids a math problem? Lucia laughed, wiping her tears. Of course, Ethan. Let's teach together. That evening, William, Lucia, and Ethan sat on the beach, watching the red sunset fade over the horizon. Ethan played with the local children nearby, leaving William and Lucia alone. Do you regret it? William asked softly. Leaving behind a quiet life to do all this? Lucia shook her head, smiling. I never had a quiet life, William. I only had pain, until I met you and Ethan. She turned to him. You didn't just give me a job. You gave me a purpose. And with that, I can change the world. William nodded slowly. I used to think my legacy was my company, my wealth. But now I know. He pointed toward the distant rooftops of the school. My legacy is those children. Their smiles. The hope we've planted. Lucia placed her hand over his. That's not just your legacy, William. It's ours. Under the glowing Haitian sunset, they sat side by side, a billionaire investor and a woman who was once a maid. Now, they were partners, friends, two souls changing the world together. 10 years later. Ethan Caldwell, 21, senior at MIT, stood before his graduation panel. What will you do after college? They asked. Ethan smiled. I'm joining the Rivera Caldwell Foundation. I'll continue my father's and Miss Lucia's work, building schools, planting hope. Why? Ethan looked out the window, remembering an autumn afternoon when he was 7. Because someone once taught me that true worth isn't in what we get, but in what we give. And the story closed. But the legacy lived on. Sometimes, the people who change our lives aren't the famous or the powerful, but the humble, quiet souls right beside us. We just need to see them. If you believe kindness can change a life, leave a like on this story. And if you believe, like William, Lucia, and Ethan, that true legacy isn't measured in wealth, but in the lives we touch, then subscribe to our channel so you won't miss the next story that warms your heart. Every week, we share journeys of kindness, redemption, and the strength of compassion. Your one small click can help spread thousands of messages of hope. Hit subscribe, turn on the bell, and join us as we continue writing the beautiful legacies of humanity.